Hey everyone, it's Tracy, and welcome back to Cosmic Conversations, a space where we discuss and decode the astrology of the moment. If you watched my last video on the full moon in Leo, you may recall that I mentioned that the February energy would include an Aquarius overload that would usher in some weird energy. So I thought it would be fitting to tune into the electricity in the sky that is this Aquarius overload for this video. Before we start talking about the overload of Aquarius energy this month, let's briefly recap the ways in which Aquarian energy manifests itself. Aquarius is the 11th sign of the zodiac, and it represents the energy of our social networks or our friends, the groups and organizations we belong to, the technology and innovative inventions that we create or use, science and space, or the life and energy beyond this planet. It also represents the evolution or revolution within our society or within our individual lives, our future hopes and wishes, caring for and serving humanity, our collective and individual human rights, our social and humanitarian causes, and our unique, weird expression of ideas and thoughts. Aquarius also represents our awakened consciousness, our freedom or independence in thought, communication, and the movement of energy. Aquarius rules things like the internet, astrology, extraterrestrial beings, decentralized markets, networks, organizations, and structures. So traditional astrology considers Aquarius, right here, to be the fixed air element, meaning it provides stability to our communication, intellect, and expression. However, I'm not of this traditional view. I know, how very Aquarian of me, right? I will assure you that this is definitely a manifestation of my natal Jupiter in Aquarius, to think outside the lines of traditional teachings. So my personal view is that Aquarius is more of the ether or space element. Borrowing from the Ayurvedic understanding of the elements, the ether element is often described as expansive. It's light because it lacks the heaviness of the earth and water elements. Ether is all-encompassing, as it has no form. It is the realm of all possibilities, the space of divine or universal intelligence. Ether is a part of all other elements, so it's everywhere, always present, and without limitation. I think that absolutely describes the essence of Aquarius. Now, the modern day ruler of Aquarius is Uranus, which is considered the harbinger of sudden and unexpected insight, change, and developments. It's these flashes of insight that spark the inventive, innovative genius of the Aquarian mind. From the expansive space of nothing, or if you look at that word a little carefully, it's no thing, unique, unconventional concepts evolve. People with strong Aquarius energy can be in a group, part of the collective, but they also need their space to be by themselves. It's within this space that they can process their thoughts and their ideas. Aquarius can be part of all and part of nothing at the very same time. I would agree with the traditional astrological view of Aquarius being a fixed energy. Saturn is the traditional ruler of Aquarius, so that brings the element of rigidity, structure, and boundaries to this energy. If you have known, talked with, or debated someone with strong Aquarius energy, you may already be aware that Aquarians can be very stubborn. They can be very set in their views, beliefs, or thoughts on any and every topic. So with the nature of Aquarian energy in mind, let's take a deeper look into what I like to call the February weirdness. As I'm recording this video on February 4th, so just a few days into the new month, we've entered this new month with a waning moon following the full moon in Leo that occurred on January 28th. Now, the full moon in Leo energy is still very applicable to this time period. So I would again encourage you to take a look at that full moon in Leo video on this channel to gain a better understanding of the lunar cycle in general and Aquarian and Leo energy. But in addition to the full moon energy, we also had Mercury turn retrograde as of January 30th. And Venus moved into the sign of Aquarius on February 1st. So you can see on the chart of the moment that I have up on screen, all of this Aquarius energy. With Venus moving into Aquarius, that marked the 5th planetary energy in the sign. This cluster of planets in one sign is known as a stellium. So as you can imagine, when you have this many planets in a sign, the energies of that sign become more pronounced. So let's picture this stellium as a big Aquarian party or group meeting, fitting since Aquarius represents groups and organizations, and it is a pretty friendly and social sign. Attending this party, we have Venus, Saturn, Jupiter, Mercury retrograde, and the Sun, all present and accounted for. Venus in Aquarius, as you can see from the images that I chose for this slide, Venus expresses itself in a very eclectic, unconventional, and unique way when in Aquarius. That's what the sign's about. So that's the style that Venus carries. Each of these planets that's in Aquarius is bringing its own unique energy to the sign. So it will bring its themes and energy and play those out through the lens of Aquarian energy. So for Venus, at our party, Venus will be discussing all the things that she enjoys, such as projects, money, values, relationships, etc. She's very friendly and very social and is discussing, as I said, all of these themes through the lens of Aquarius. So for you, this may translate into taking on a technological or scientific project. It may manifest itself in doing research about investing in cryptocurrencies, gold and silver, or other type of foreign currencies, or perhaps you may have already invested in those types of things and you're just watching the markets. Because definitely during this time and at this party, Venus is talking financial matters. And with the chaotic and disruptive nature of Aquarius, that could mean very chaotic and turbulent market conditions. Now, Venus also wants to talk about how relationships are going. Venus may be feeling stuck or stifled, especially after coming out of Capricorn, which is a more restrictive type of energy. So as she enters into Aquarius, she'll really be trying to gauge how relationships are feeling right now and trying to figure out how to find more freedom or independence. So in the world and in your life, this could look like sudden or unexpected breakups, separations, or divorces as a result of Venus searching for greater freedom and independence. This could also very much manifest itself in your friend groups and organizations, both on and offline. They may be getting a shakeup during this time. If Venus were looking for a new relationship, it may be best to seek out people who can be both a friend and a lover. That's right. Venus in Aquarius would definitely be looking for friends with benefits. As the slide says, the best friends are friends with benefits. During this time, we may also see women's rights issues or gender equality issues come to the forefront. It's important to note that even though Venus is a feminine energy, that doesn't always equate to just women's issues. Venus, we all carry feminine and masculine energy. So any male who carries heavier Venusian energies, such as people with a lot of placements in Libra or Taurus, or perhaps if you're a male with Venus in Aquarius natally, this energy will be strong or will strongly affect you. As a ruler of Libra, Venus also seeks balance. So on our Aquarian seesaw, the chipmunk or the bear, which is wearing the blue hat and blue t-shirt, can definitely represent our overload of Aquarius energy. All of this energy is in one sign of the zodiac. So it is definitely throwing things a bit off balance, a bit off kilter in the cosmos. And with that, it may be hard to find balance with so many planets in Aquarius. But we'll talk about ways to find some balance in this energy a little later on. Let's get back to our party and party participants. So we've already seen Venus in Aquarius and the themes that she will be discussing at our party. Next, so also at the party, we have Professor Saturn. Professor Saturn looks at Aquarius as a large classroom. And as such, he's probably off in the corner lecturing about government, corporate and banking structures, laws and regulations, restrictions, but he's also probably talking to us about the way that we treat others and making sure that we're treating others as we wish to be treated, otherwise known as sowing the seeds of karma. Saturn's also probably looking at the integrity in our creations, our thoughts, our communications, and our interactions. Not just what we're currently creating, but Saturn was last in Aquarius in the 1990s. So Professor Saturn is probably taking a look at a lot of the things that were built, either technological advances, systems, structures, laws that were put in place during that time, and really looking at whether or not they still hold integrity. Saturn's also defining goals and having us work hard to attain our future hopes and dreams. You know, all the fun stuff that Saturn brings to the party. Now, while Saturn is off in the corner, probably showing us scientific data, graphs, tables, pie charts, or maybe even redefining our concept of time, space, and frequency, we also have the life of the party, Jupiter, in the center of the group, entertaining everyone with stories of how he narrowly escaped a similar stellium experience in Capricorn just last year, with Saturn, Pluto, the Sun, Mercury, the South Node, and Mars all breathing down his neck. That's right. As Jupiter's nature is, the story is, of course, grandiose and over the top. But it's also a tale that weaves wisdom, imparts faith, and is trying to teach us to use the experiences that we had last year in 2020 to help define where and how we go into the future. For Jupiter, who rules travel, it's fully acknowledging that we may not be able to travel in the ways that we did before COVID, but Jupiter's pointing out the new opportunities for expanding our horizons through the Aquarian energy with perhaps virtual travel or maybe a little space travel. It's also helping to awaken us to new beliefs, maybe reviewing our current beliefs and paradigms. And of course, as only Jupiter can, it's bringing sudden and unexpected luck and opportunities to our lives in weird and unusual ways. Now, with Jupiter busy entertaining with funny stories, Mercury is also at the party, taking us back in time. With Mercury retrograde in Aquarius, it could be bringing friends from the past back into your life. Could also be resurrecting ideas from the past that were not acted upon, or perhaps they were acted upon, but the plans need to be revised. If you're into science and technology, perhaps you had some sort of scientific theory that lacks substance or proof and now needs to be revisited or rewritten in order to move forward. Mercury retrograde is also looking at scientific data, but with an eye to revise any errors that may have been made. So during this time, pay attention to perhaps any errors that will be corrected with respect to COVID data. Mercury rules data, Aquarius rules science, so we could very well see some revisions to the data that we've been given with respect to COVID stats. Just one of the ways that this could play out. Mercury is also injecting or trying to inject into the conversation reflections on the freedom or lack thereof within how we communicate. I think we all have seen the sudden rise in censorship on social media platforms. So this Mercury retrograde could have us really reviewing how free is our individual or collective speech on social media platforms? And are we okay with the censorship that's occurring? It may be also having us notice any disruptions with the internet. I hope you all have backed up your data before Mercury went retrograde. Just as an FYI, this is my 4th attempt at recording this video. Mercury's been having fun with both my internet connection and the sound for this video. So hopefully this will be the final time I record this particular video. In addition to reviewing our individual and collective free speech and internet disruptions, we may also be looking at how we express our views through perhaps protest, social gatherings, on and offline. These are all things that Mercury retrograde in Aquarius is bringing to the party. We also have the sun, who wants to illuminate how these energies and conversations affect both our collective and individual awareness. As the sun is in its detriment in Aquarius, in the external realm, the sun could be highlighting the themes that affect the collective and placing emphasis on awakening the collective consciousness to our need for freedom, human rights, living and thinking outside the box, and evolving within our society. Individually, we may be looking at how we can be of service to humanity, how we create and live within community. Where can we be our authentic selves within our community, friend groups, on and offline? And the sun may also be highlighting the path that we navigate to our individual conscious awakening or up-leveling. It's quite a conversation going on in the sky at this moment, wouldn't you agree? By February 9th or 10th, depending on where you live in the world, the moon will also enter into Aquarius. Now that is not officially the new moon, because the new moon will occur at 23 degrees of Aquarius. So the moon has to transit over all of those other planets before it gets to the sun. But as the moon enters into Aquarius, it's adding our emotions, intuition, subconscious patterning to the conversation at this party, preparing us for the new moon. Now I'll go into the new moon in Aquarius in a separate video, as I firmly believe this new moon is a powerful and potent time to set new intentions and goals for the future. Yeah, I know that many astrologers say that about almost every new moon that occurs, But stay tuned for that video and you will understand why this one really fits the bill. Now, this party in Aquarius is occurring in a tense aspect to Uranus and Mars in Taurus. Uranus and Mars are in Venus's house over there in Taurus. They're not very comfortable, which is surprising because Venus in Taurus is all about comfort, but it's not a very comfortable position for either one of these planets to be in. At the same time, Venus is in Uranus's house, Aquarius. So this is called a mutual reception. We have Venus in Aquarius who would much rather be in Taurus at home because Venus knows where everything is in Taurus, and everything at her home is comfortable, it's luxurious, it's just the way she likes it, it's just the way she wants it. So Venus is way more comfortable, but the fact is she's not there. Uranus would much rather be in Aquarius because Uranus has the Aquarian homestead set up as uniquely and eclectic as Uranus in Aquarius would be. Things aren't where you would expect them to be. Uranus in Aquarius would be having the sugar in the bathroom and the cotton balls in the garage. That would be the kind of setup. And Uranus is not particularly happy with having 5 other energies in his home, probably rearranging his stuff and putting it in spaces that they think are the proper space for it. But it's just not as unusual and unconventional as Uranus would like. Now remember, Uranus is not the type that's going to call the cops on the disruptive party that's going on at his home. No, he's more about freedom and valuing freedom when he's in Taurus. So it would be more a sense of when Uranus squares these planets in his home space, he's trying to get them to understand the value in being unusual, that it's okay to have the sugar in the bathroom, that it's maybe unconventional, but there is freedom in not having to put things in a proper place all the time. It's still a little weird for me, but you get the drift with that example. Now, there is a lot more to the Uranus and Mars square from Taurus to Aquarius, which I also covered a bit in the full moon in Leo video. So definitely check it out. Not only, as I previously mentioned, with all of these Aquarian energies playing out in your life, it could create a sense of imbalance or cause a feeling of overwhelm to you. Aquarius rules the circulatory and nervous system. So it could have you overthinking, overprocessing data and information, could have you overthinking and overprocessing or taking in way too much news from the external world. Stress and anxiety could be at an all-time high during this period. So it goes back to what I was saying about Venus in Aquarius will be seeking balance, but there may be a difficulty in finding balance. However, it's really important to find balance in this energy, or at least a semblance of balance. Since Aquarius rules the circulatory system, you could begin to either experience it yourself or see more information in the news or have other family members or people that you know experience poor circulation. There could be a rise in heart attacks at this time, palpitations, strokes, blood clots. They can all be more prevalent at this time. So please be mindful to tend to your circulatory system. Cut down on the foods that create artery blockages or raise blood pressure. On the flip side, we could also hear about scientific breakthroughs in these areas. You could hear about scientific breakthroughs with respect to heart disease. We could also hear about new tools and techniques that'll help us manage our nervous system. So look out for that manifestation of this Aquarius energy as well. Now, to find balance with all of this Aquarian energy and avoid being in your head too much at this time it's necessary to look at the Aquarius's opposite sign, Leo, for the balance point. Heart energy is necessary during this Aquarian overload. What activities or projects bring you joy? It's time to either find them, start to engage in these joyful activities again. What do you do to have fun? This is a time to be creative, express love for yourself and others in your life. Get back to what brings joy to your inner child. Now, a word of caution, with Mercury retrograde, your lower or more rational mind is not as focused or clear as it usually might be, making you prone to accidents. Now, since Mercury rules moving around within your local environment, try to be more aware when walking or running in your neighborhood. Aquarius also rules the calves and ankles. So if you were to take all of these energies together, they could manifest in twisted or sprained ankles from walking or running accidents. Aquarius also rules electricity, so I also probably wouldn't go jogging during a lightning storm either. Kidding, but not really. Just be careful during this time, for sure. In the spirit of the Mercury retrograde, I thought it would be fitting to look back at the previous times that we've experienced this much energy in the sign of the water bearer. So the last time we experienced this much Aquarius with these planets in particular was January and February of 1962. At that time, we had the Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Saturn, Jupiter, and the South Node in Aquarius. Mercury also went retrograde during this time. But one of the main differences between then and now was the fact that since the South Node was in Aquarius, the new moon in 1962 was an eclipse. So much more powerful and potent energy at that new moon in Aquarius in 1962 than we will feel in our new moon in Aquarius this February. However, we can take a look at the events that occurred around this time to get a sense of how this energy plays out in the collective. I'd also say people who are born during this period will be very familiar with the transits that we're about to experience as they natally have all of this Aquarian energy. So let's take a look at some of the events that took place in January and February of 1962. Now, I don't have all of the pictures up to represent these events, but I'll point out when I am referring to an event that has a picture. So the Organization of American States suspended Cuba's membership in January of 1962. They weren't reinstated until 2009. Cuba, if you were to look at their natal chart as a nation, has heavy fixed energy. They've got a sun in Taurus, a moon in Scorpio, a Leo ascendant, and a midheaven in Taurus. So all of that Aquarian energy was either squaring or opposing something in their chart. We also have, if you take a look at the slide down here, there was a University of Chicago sit-ins to protest the racial segregation of off-campus housing. Now in this photo, you may not recognize him, but the gentleman who is standing up speaking to the protesters is Bernie Sanders. So here we have the precursor to what probably would have been all of the Bernie memes. Memes weren't invented at that time, so Bernie got a little lucky back in 1962. But we have kind of a reminiscent energy between a politician that is still very active in 2021, dealing with some Aquarian energy, protesting civil liberties being restricted. We also had the US begin performing nuclear tests in Nevada. Uranus rules uranium and nuclear energy. So during the 1960s, we had a lot of nuclear testing because of all of this Aquarian energy. We also had the Taiwan Stock Exchange begin trading in 1962. We also had JFK, the president of that time, issue 9 executive orders delegating emergency preparedness functions for various federal agencies and departments to be implemented in the event of a national emergency that required a declaration of martial law. A lot of space news during the 1960s. Particularly in 1962, we had John Glenn orbit Earth on Friendship 7. Interesting that the spaceship was called Friendship 7 as Aquarius rules friendship. This was part of a larger project called Project Mercury. During 1962, there was also the Supreme Court ruling in Bailey versus Patterson that racial segregation on buses was unconstitutional. So again, we have a civil rights issue that comes up during a lot of Aquarian energy. Also, I mean, Saturn was in Aquarius at this time as well. So we had the physical law from the highest court of the land. Jupiter also playing a part in that. And last but not least, we had 15 American Jupiter missiles become operational at a Turkish base, which was within 1,000 miles striking range to the Soviet Union, setting the stage for the Cuban Missile Crisis in October of 1962. So the missiles were actually operational in, I believe it was February of 1962, which later then resulted in the Cuban Missile Crisis that occurred in October of 1962. Now I'm going to break this event down a little more because there are a little more nuanced transits that relate to our current day. So you'll recall in the 1962 chart, Mars and Saturn began a new cycle in January of 1962. And by the time the opposition occurred between Mars and Saturn from Aquarius, Saturn being in Aquarius and Mars being in Leo, that occurred in October of 1962, we have the Cuban Missile Crisis. Now for us, I'm not saying that there will be a Cuban Missile Crisis, but there will be some sort of event that will occur from the creation of a new Mars-Saturn cycle in Aquarius. If you'll look back to March 2020, that's when the new Mars-Saturn cycle began. It began at 0 degrees of Aquarius on, I believe, March 31st, 2020. Now, the first quarter square of this transit occurred in the fall, but most people remember it because it occurred with Saturn at home in Capricorn and Mars at home in Aries. We've just recently in January had a Saturn-Mars square from Aquarius to Taurus, but the opposition between Saturn and Mars will occur while Saturn is in Aquarius and Mars is in Leo, and that'll occur at the end of June 2021. So individually, look back to March of last year and see what started that has the Mars-Saturn themes. Collectively, we can look back to that time frame and see the restrictions that came about with respect to COVID in most countries during that time period. So perhaps for us collectively, come June, we're going to see some culmination in that energy. But definitely individually, go back to March 2020 and see, because this is a cycle that's playing out with a culmination point that's coming in June of 2021, much like they had the culmination in October of 1962 with the Cuban Missile Crisis. So moving along, prior to 1962, our last overload of Aquarian energy came in January and February of 1903, when much like our current transits, the Sun, Mercury, Venus, Jupiter, and Saturn were all in Aquarius. We also had Mercury go retrograde, and this time we had Venus and Jupiter conjunct shortly after the new moon in Aquarius. For us, present day, Venus and Jupiter will conjunct the same day as that new moon in Aquarius. But of course, more on that in our new moon in Aquarius video. So taking a look at some of the notable events that occurred in 1903 that had an Aquarian flavor to it, We have the first west-east transatlantic radio broadcast made from the US to England. So a new technological advance in communication during that time. We also had Cuba lease Guantanamo Bay to the US in perpetuity. So you will recall Cuba has a lot of fixed energy. So again, they've popped up in some of the worthy news of the time. We also had the UK women's suffrage movement groups begin to organize. So recall Venus was in Aquarius at that time, and we begin to have social movements where women are seeking the vote. We also had the March of the Mill protest, where children working in the mills marched to President Roosevelt's home to protest the lax child labor laws. You can see down here. But there's also the protests in Little Rock, Arkansas over the segregation of streetcars. So again, we see civil rights coming up in an Aquarian overload of energy. So that's kind of a past look at Aquarius overload energy. Now, looking ahead to how this energy may affect various people. Certainly, as I said, anyone who is born with planets or angles in Aquarius, or born during that 1962 stellium, people who have a lot of fixed energy, or even countries that have a lot of fixed energy in their charts, will all be feeling the electricity of the Aquarian vibe at this time. So the fixed energy placements are, of course, Aquarius, Taurus, Leo, and Scorpio placements. Those specifically with Venus, Jupiter, and Saturn in Aquarius will all be experiencing the return of these planets to their natal placements. Now, not to diminish the importance of a Saturn return by any means, I want to focus specifically on a generational activation of this Aquarius energy. I will probably definitely do a video in the near future about Saturn returns because they're so important, but I really want to specifically focus on Generation Z, because they are really having their Aquarian energy come online big time with all of this Aquarius energy. So Generation Z is the generation that comes after the millennials. They're born between 1995 and 2012. So I'm not talking about the entire generation, but specifically those Gen Zers that were born from January 1996 to 2003 will be having their natal Uranus activated by all of this Aquarius energy. Those born 1998 to 2011 are having their natal Neptune activated. So outer planets in their natal chart are coming online with all of this Aquarian energy. For this generation, it's not their first activation of outer planet energy, because this would be the generation that had Pluto in Sagittarius. So they just had Saturn going through Sagittarius, and in some cases, an opposition to their natal Saturn, which might have been in Gemini. But it's an important transit for this generation. And let's dive into why. First, I'll say if you have a Gen Zer in your life, either your child, niece, nephew, sibling, friend, or if you yourself are a Gen Zer, during this Aquarian overload transit, be mindful of being compassionate, caring, and understanding of yourself or the other Gen Zers around you or in your life. This is a lot of energy for all of us to process, but particularly for this group. This is an activation of the energy that denotes a spiritual awakening. So at this time, internally, with having Uranus, or with being born with Uranus in its home sign of Aquarius, internally, This is a group that could feel out of place within society. Like they just don't fit in because they have unique ideas, different ways of expressing themselves, different ways of wanting to be in society, and just having a sense of not really fitting the mold of what they see in front of them. And this is really going to become prominent during this transit over their natal Uranus and their natal Neptune. So how could it manifest? It could manifest in this generation trying to find more eccentric and unconventional ways of showing up in the world. Eccentric and unconventional behavior. They could be experimenting with how to express this energy in a way that can make them feel different from the groups, from society, from their families. This is also with Neptune involved. It could be a time when experimenting with psychedelics, plant medicines, or other drugs in search of a spiritual awakening or enlightenment, or even just to numb the feeling of being kind of like feeling like an outcast, because this is really, Uranus is so different, and they're probably the ones that dress differently, that would like to dress differently, but maybe they can't express themselves in that way. This is just really feeling like the square peg in the round hole. So they may also want to join social movements, causes, charitable organizations, or even start their own groups that focus on these areas. It is definitely the energy that expresses in uniqueness, sovereignty, heightened sensitivity. That's very Neptunian. So, you know, this generation will be very sensitive during this time and highly intuitive. It may be hard to believe for a generation that might have been born with a cell phone or tablet already in hand that they could be more fixated with technology and social media. Remember, this would be a group or a generation that is currently going to school online for much of their education. So they are really getting an overload of technology. So it's important to remember to balance the amount of Aquarian energy, the amount of screen time, with heart-centered energy. So being out in nature, having fun, playing are all important outlets too. This Aquarian activation can tax their nervous system. It can make them very stressed and anxious without them really understanding why they're feeling this way. It could be a time when Gen Xers are receiving intuitive downloads, messages, or making connections with higher realms. Could even be with extraterrestrial beings, or maybe they're just having weird dreams about all of these things. It's important at this point to encourage them to keep a dream journal. Allow them to talk about what they're experiencing without judging what they're saying, even if it doesn't fit in with your own belief system. If you can't do that, then help them to find someone who they can talk to, or introduce them to creative ways to express this energy. This is the generation, a generation born with Uranus in Aquarius and Neptune in Aquarius. This is the generation that came to teach us how to be okay with letting our freak flag fly. So it's important that we give them the space in the room to explore exactly how unique and unconventional they can be. So in terms of the energy overwhelming their nervous system, a few tools for calm, maybe restorative yoga or breathing techniques. That's excellent for calming the nervous system. This generation would also benefit from listening to solfeggio frequencies. I have up on the screen the hertz that at least 10 of the frequencies to listen to either during meditation. Now, it may be a little hard for this generation to meditate because at this particular time, because their mind will be so active. But even if they're doing homework and you're playing solfeggio frequencies in the background, that might help at least a little, if not a lot. The important key message is that this is an important time in this generation's spiritual, individual, and collective awareness. So foster it as best as you can. I hope that this information will assist you in navigating the next few weeks as we experience the electrifying energy of Aquarius. As always, you can keep this conversation going by hitting the subscribe button and notification bell. We haven't quite gotten to that Aquarian energy where I can telepathically let you all know that I've uploaded a video. So important to hit that subscribe and notification bell so you can be alerted when I upload new videos. Until we talk again, with all of this energy, tune into your heart as you navigate it. And from my heart center to yours, I'm sending you so much love and wishing you many, many blessings. Be well.